Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be talking to you about my favourite non-fiction books. Within this video I'm only going to be looking at non-fiction books that are focused on a particular topic or subject rather than anything that is biographical / autobiographical in nature. I'm going to end up releasing a completely separate video for my favourite biographies or autobiographies, and I'm also not including in this any feminist literature that I've read. I studied philosophy at university and feminism was one of the topics that I did as a piece of coursework, so I've ended up reading quite a lot in the genre, and I'm going to end up releasing a separate video about all of my favourite books in that area at some point over the next few months. So I've got about 7 or 8 books to talk to you about today, and I just figured let's jump straight in. So the first book is actually 2 books which I think should be read in conjunction with one another, and that is Mindset by Caroline Dweck and Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. So these 2 books I think make a perfect combination together, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. So Mindset is Caroline Dweck's sort of pioneering book that talks about her big theory, which is growth mindset and the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. So you quite often hear people use phrases like, oh, I'm just not good at maths, I'm just not a sporty person, I'm not the kind of person who can do blah. And if you're the kind of person who uses phrases like that, that probably means that you've got a bit of a fixed mindset for whatever thing that you're talking about. A growth mindset instead is somebody who views their abilities as being constantly flexible and something that can always be improved and worked on. And the theory is that if you have a growth mindset about things, you're going to end up feeling happier and probably more accomplished in general, because rather than linking your worth with something that you're either good or bad at, you will consider yourself independent to your abilities and very happy to continue to grow and develop and push in an area, because failure is no longer scary, it's just part of the learning process. So this is Caroline Dweck's big pioneering book, which covers a whole range of things about how growth mindset can be applied to every walk of life. But one thing that I do think is a little short on the ground on is practical advice on how to get a growth mindset or improve your mindset in a growth direction. So for that is where I lean on Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. So Black Box Thinking is a look at the concept of failure and the feedback that it can give us about how we can improve on whatever it is that we're doing. The first half of the book looks at the medical industry and how different it is in comparison to the piloting industry, I guess is what you'd call it. So pilots have a lot of opportunities to acknowledge and understand their mistakes and make sure that they can learn from them in the future, whereas in comparison the medical community can quite often want to hide mistakes because of things like lawsuits and all sorts of problems in that area. Matthew Syed is arguing that by making an industry more aware of its failures and sort of problems in its common practices, everything can move towards a positive direction, and that actually failure is just a learning opportunity rather than being something that's a black mark against yourself. The second half of the book really looks at business and how failure is really key to running a successful business, but the key thing is to fail often, fail quickly, and learn from it. So there's no good just failing over and over again if you're not going to take the time to understand what went wrong and how you can fix in the future. So my theory is that by combining these 2, you get a perfect formula for how to end up improving your growth mindset. So this gives you all of the key points for what is a growth mindset and how to acknowledge when you're stuck in a fixed one, and this gives you the understanding of how to view failure and how to make sure that when you are failing, you are using it in a way that means that you can positively learn, which will increase your growth mindset. I hope that makes sense. I've kind of smashed the 2 together. I do think both work really well independently as well, and both have amazing TED Talks on their theories, so if you're not down for reading the whole book, maybe check out the TED Talk instead. I mentioned earlier in this video that I studied philosophy at university, and I have in my hands the book that is to blame for that fact. It's The Pig That Wanted to Be Eaten and 99 Other Thought Experiments by Julian Baggini. This book, as well as Sophie's World by Justin Gardner, are probably responsible for like 95% of the undergraduates studying philosophy out there. So a thought experiment, if you've never heard the term before, is a scenario that we create designed to be able to look at something that we can't easily test or play out in the real world because it's either impossible or unethical, and instead gives us an opportunity to be able to look into the scenario and try and see what logically makes sense, what our intuitions tell us about that topic, and it's a really common tool for understanding lots of the bigger concepts in philosophy. This book is really good because it gives you a broad range of different thought experiments, from theology to ethics to metaphysics and logic, and it really goes through a whole range of... If I show you one, it gives you the description of the thought experiment and then a very, very brief discussion about what different answers you could have for this thought experiment and what they mean, linking it with kind of wider concepts. And then it also gives you a handful of other thought experiments that are linked and are on a similar kind of topic. It's a really lovely look at loads of different topics in philosophy, so if it's a subject that you're really not too sure where to start with, I'd really recommend this one. The back also has a lot of information about like where you can get more information about all of these different thought experiments. So if one or two of them really do jump out and catch your eye, you can go on and read the original articles that they were found in and some of the literature around them. So it's a brilliant jumping off point for the entire subject of philosophy. And like I said, this is the book, it's the reason why I studied philosophy at university. I read this in my A-levels, so now gone nearly a decade ago. Jesus, I'm getting old. And it was just a really brilliant way of kind of confirming that was the subject I definitely wanted to study. So my next book is a bit of a beast, and that is NeuroTribes by Steve Silberman. This book describes itself as the legacy of autism, and I think that is a very, very fitting title for it. It takes a really broad, sweeping look at autism in general, both in terms of the historical context of various famous historical figures who there are arguments to say that they were on a spectrum somewhere. It looks at some of the original diagnoses, the various arguments for where it's come from, the various different treatments that have been around over the years, the discussion of where this idea of people sitting on a spectrum has come from, autism and its links in the science fiction community. It's an incredible book that just spans such a huge range of information. My brushes with autism have been fairly limited in my life. I currently work with children, and sometimes the children who I work with have been diagnosed with autism. Sometimes they are undiagnosed, but you get an idea. So I found this book very, very helpful for trying to get an understanding of what the world was like for them, but also just from a very like broad historical context. I think that this book is absolutely fascinating, looking at something that has sort of gone through waves of being very much in the public eye and what that has done for it and where we're at now. It is a big book and it's quite dense, so it is a bit of a commitment, but I would say it's totally worth the time, so really do check this one out. It's incredible. One of my favourite topics is art history, and a fantastic book for that is What Are You Looking At? 150 Years of Modern Art in the Blink of an Eye by Gompertz. If you've ever been a bit baffled as to where things like surrealism and Damien Hirst's Shark or Tracey Emin's Tent all fall into, or Tracey Emin's Bed all fall in terms of the sort of broader understanding of modern art, this is a really fantastic book to pick up. It spans, as the title suggests, 150 years, going from the pre-Raphaelites all the way to the modern day. What I would say is if you are going to read this book, have your phone handy with the Google images up, because it mentions so many different works of art that you're going to want to be able to connect them up and see them. There are very few pictures in this book, like there's a couple, but nowhere near enough. Like in your average paragraph, he will mention about 3 different works of art, and unless you can see them, sometimes the points can be a little bit difficult to grasp. It's excellent because it really sets all of the art movements in the cultural and historical context of what was informing them at the time and how they linked back to ones previously and sort of where they were referencing from, so you can really see the train of thought going through. It's one that I really want to reread. Everyone would benefit from several readings of this because it is quite dense. And there's just a lot of information going on. So whilst I got the general gist, I think it would be good to reread it again, because you're just dealing with so many names and isms and titles, and there's a lot that happens in 150 years, okay guys? But it is amazing, and Will Gompertz is brilliant at breaking it down to a real kind of layman's level and just rolling through so that you totally understand what is happening. My next book to talk about is Farmageddon by Philip Lymbery. This is a look at the meat industry and, as it says on the title, the true cost of cheap meat. It's no secret that the bulk of humanity is fairly keen on eating meat, and especially people in the Western world, we do have a very high meat diet. This book is, rather than arguing for vegetarianism, it's a look at what the meat industry is like currently and what that means in terms of implications for the future. And this is including things like environmental implications and the impact that it's having on the environment, as well as things like medical implications, the number of antibiotics that meat is pumped with at the moment, and how problematic that will be in the long run, as well as various health and economic problems that it is creating. It's not trying to push anybody in any one particular way, it's just an in-depth look at the meat industry. Now, with anything like this, it's obviously going to be hitting a lot of emotion points for people, because nobody wants to feel like they're having their wrist slapped or that they're being told that they can't do something. One thing I did find quite frustrating about this book as well was it didn't really give any practical guidelines for how we could change things beyond maybe just like eat less meat, which is totally doable, but is not something that I think a lot of people, myself included, are necessarily going to go for straight off the bat. It was a very scary read. Don't read it whilst eating, that would be a terrible plan, but a very, very interesting read. Now, I've not researched this any further. I have no idea how accurate or not these claims are, but it was a fascinating look at a world that I don't really think too much about currently, and it does mean that I do now think twice sometimes when picking up chicken in the supermarket. It's cool, I'll give it that. The final book I have to talk about, I have talked about on my channel before, assuming that my makeup book tag has gone out before this one. I'm filming a bunch of videos in one go because work is about to get a little bit crazy for me over the next few weeks, and I'm really worried that I won't be able to fit filming in. So whilst I've got a little bit of downtime, I'm trying to rack up some videos so I've got some in the bank for when life is a bit hectic. So assuming that this one goes out after that makeup book tag, you have heard me talk about before Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. This is a book about geopolitics, and it calls itself The 10 Maps That Tell You Everything You Need to Know About Global Politics. It's a look at how the geography of countries can impact their politics both now and historically. I think this book is brilliant at reducing down very, very complicated terms, looking at, you know, like entire countries and reducing them to sort of basically high school bullying backyard brawl, which makes far more sense to my brain. So if you are somebody who really kind of struggles with a lot of the big political terms and ideas, you know, well, why is America doing this and how come Russia's always that and what's going on in the Middle East and what's this, this might be the book for you, because I really think it helps to strip out a lot of those more complicated terms that you often hear, and instead just gives it to you in really, really simple language about, you know, these guys tend to fight with these guys because of this, and, you know, these two don't tend to fight because there's a big mountain range in the way, it makes it quite hard to fight, things like that. My partner read this as well and said that it was also brilliant, and he is far more into politics and things like that. So if you are somebody who is fairly hot on it, hot on the topic, then I do think that there is still something in here for you anyway. So that's some of my top non-fiction that I've read over the past few years. I'm sure I could do another load of these because I really do enjoy non-fiction. So if you enjoy this and you want to hear some more non-fiction recommendations, I said top in this video and I feel like that's probably inaccurate, because there's at least another 7 or 8 non-fiction books that I think are awesome. So top might be a bit misleading. These are some non-fiction books that I enjoy, some of many, and if you'd like to hear more of those many, give me a thumbs up, comment down below, all that jazz, you know the drill. Hit subscribe, other such buzzwordy YouTube ending type concepts. Hit the bell button to get notifications and all that jazz. So yeah, I've literally no idea when I'm next going to film again, or when I'm going to see you guys, or when this is going up. So I hope whenever this is in September/October, you're having an awesome time, and I will chat to you soon. Bye!